Hi, this is immigration attorney Erin, and today I'm going to be reviewing a chapter from Miss Allie Beth Stuckey's book called Toxic Empathy. I have the jacket here, I have the book here and the jacket here. I didn't want to ruin it, but it's called Toxic Empathy: How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion by Allie Beth Stuckey. So she also authored You're Not Enough, and That's Okay. So I've heard her before. I've listened to her podcast some, but when my friend mentioned this book and she mentioned there was a chapter called No Human is Illegal, that really piqued my interest. So I ordered the book right away and I wanted to read it and see what she had to say about this, because I tend to agree that that phrase, no human is illegal, is pretty unhelpful. But I also wondered how this was going to be a jumping off point for her and talking about toxic empathy, or maybe how we're caring about immigrants too much or something like that. So I understand the concept of the book, right? Toxic empathy. No one likes to be kind of forced into agreeing with one side or another because they're going to be a bad person if they don't. And I think that in a way both sides can do that, right? Oh, if you don't agree with my position, then I'm going to tell you you're murdering kids. Or if you don't agree with me, I'm going to tell you you're actually, taking away healthcare rights from women. So both sides do this, and it makes sense because you probably hold a political position because you think it's right. So you're telling someone else that they're doing something wrong. Like it makes sense. But I get she, is trying to point out that, hey, specifically to Christians, I don't want you to feel manipulated into falling for these leftist ideologies, or thinking that they somehow espouse Christian values, because they really don't, and this is really just a toxic empathy that is being forced upon you. So, okay, so no human is illegal. Basically, her argument in this, what she calls lie number 4, in this chapter, she's talking about how, like, the liberals have made people, or how they framed the immigration issue as one of needing to care for people who are coming to this country, but in actuality, we need to think more about American interests and, what's going to benefit these immigrants at the end of the day, because they're undertaking this dangerous journey, and what's going to benefit Americans because illegal immigrants are, committing crimes in the United States and, undermining our workforce and whatever, what have you. So I'll go through her argument in more detail, but that's sort of the overall gist, I would say, ending with more of a theological discussion of why this is okay, because you would need to think about this, like, theologically. How would God, or how would your faith justify doing something harmful to another human? And basically the justification is that God wants order, and we need to have an orderly system because God is orderly. This, however, completely, and we'll get to this more at the end when I'm kind of summing things up, but this completely bypasses even the option that we could have an empathetic and orderly system. And we'll talk about how that would apply specifically to the case that she brought up in here, that she starts the chapter off with, which is a very sad case of Maribel Trujillos Diaz. So Maribel is a Mexican woman who was deported in 2017, and she first entered the United States in 2002. She had 4 children, and one of them was epileptic, and her husband couldn't work because he had a medical issue. So it's quite an intense situation where she's caring for herself and 5 family members, and there were some medical issues in the family. It was pretty intense situation, it sounds like. And at the end of the day, she did get deported, which Allie would say was just like tough, because we need to have order in this country and you don't belong here. So I'm so sorry, but this, and then Allie goes on to talk about, like, how we need to have mercy, quote unquote, like mercy for the sojourner, but then also have order in our country. And we don't want like a out of control system with illegal immigrants killing Americans. So I thought it was very interesting, first of all, that she chose this particular case. As an immigration lawyer, I have seen many, many people who have very sad stories, very sad situations, very desperate situations, where you just look at them and you say, I'm sorry, but you have a weak case. I'm sorry, like this doesn't really fit the asylum definition. I'm sorry, but you're applying late and you have no evidence. You're not going to meet the withholding standard. Like, there's so many instances, so many stories where you could say that someone is in a really hard situation and they just are not going to be able to stay here. That happens all the time. That's why I'm really confused why she chose this particular example as someone who is like a quintessential sad story but tough, because of this. And I'll get into what happened in this particular case. So what she doesn't tell in her book, which is a huge misrepresentation, which is interestingly put in a chapter titled Lie number 4. I think this is a bit of a lie in itself, how this story is presented, because it's, well, we'll get into it. You'll see why. So here's what happened in Maribel Trujillos Diaz's case on the legal side of things, okay? So there's a case in the Sixth Circuit. It was a 2018 case. It's called Trujillos Diaz v. Sessions, and it was published January 16th, 2018. I can put a link to it in the description. But essentially, let's see here. It was a review. So, but by the time I got to the Sixth Circuit, there's different levels of review. So if you get picked up by immigration and you go into immigration court, you're going to see an immigration judge. That gets appealed if you appeal it. If your application for relief is denied, it would get appealed to the Board of Immigration Appeals, or the BIA. And if that gets denied, then you get another chance to go to the Sixth Circuit. And this case was actually published, which is a bit of a rarity. So nice for our purposes. We get to read about what actually happened. So then it goes up to the Sixth Circuit. So this had gone through a number of those appeal levels. It had already gone up to the Sixth Circuit, and that's the decision that I read to get all this information from that I'm going to share with you. So this was a review. The Sixth Circuit was reviewing the denial of a motion to reopen removal proceedings. So previously, before it was appealed to the Sixth Circuit, the BIA, the Board of Immigration Appeals, had ruled that Trujillos Diaz failed to establish a prima facie case of eligibility for asylum, withholding, and she had failed because she couldn't show that she would be singled out individually for persecution based on her family membership. So basically, Trujillos Diaz, she was back in Mexico. Her brother had issues with a cartel, and initially when she applied for asylum, she said, hey, I'm afraid that I'm also going to have issues with this cartel because this is how it works in Mexico. Like, the cartels go after whole families, and my brother had all these issues, and I'm afraid I'm gonna have issues. And it was denied. Like, the application was denied essentially because the judge found that there wasn't enough evidence that she was actually going to be persecuted in the future. It just seemed like, well, your brother had problems, but nothing ever happened to you. Nothing ever happened to your family members either. That's another point that the court had made, was like, nothing ever happened to you, nothing ever happened to your family. It really just seems to be an isolated incident with your brother. Okay, so this, so it's denied. Then fast forward a number of years, she gets to, was it like 2017? Let's see. So she had that hearing that I was just talking about where her asylum was denied. That was July 11th, 2012. She appealed to the BIA. The BIA dismissed that case, reiterating again that she had not established a clear probability of persecution in Mexico because her parents and 2 siblings had not been harmed by the gang. Okay, so she didn't file a petition for review. So even though that was denied, she got an order of supervision. She kept her work authorization. She was able to stay in the U.S. till under that until April 2017, and she did regular ICE check-ins during the time. So it's not like she was lost out there in the world. The U.S. knew where she was. The government knew where she was. Okay, then in February 2017, her father is kidnapped by the Knights Templar, another gang or cartel, and she was directly threatened in this instant. And I'm going to quote the Sixth Circuit opinion about this. According to Trujillos Diaz's father, during his kidnapping, his captors told him that they were looking for Omar Daniel, Trujillos Diaz's brother, who had previously refused to join La Familia cartel. The men told him that they, quote, wanted to find Omar Daniel because they were upset that he would not work for the gang, and that, quote, they were very angry and that they could not find Omar Daniel because he had fled to the United States. They mentioned Trujillos Diaz by name, telling her father that they, quote, knew he was the father of Omar Daniel and Maribel, end quote, and that they, quote, knew that Maribel had gotten to the United States too, end quote. They threatened to, quote, and these many quotes, this is quoting from the father's declaration, I believe, that they threatened to, quote, hurt the rest of his family if they could not get their hands on Omar Daniel and Maribel. And the quote, and the Sixth Circuit quote. Okay, so basically, what happened is in 2017, there was another kidnapping of the father. The father heard his two children mentioned by name. Previously, the court had said, we're not going to grant you asylum because no one else in your family has been harmed and you haven't been singled out. Well, something happens that directly contradicts that. So Maribel files a motion to reopen. And motions to reopen usually would have a time limit on how when they could do that. And an exception to the time limit would be if there's a change in country conditions. This is the the factor on which she argued that she could reopen this case. And she also did a motion to stay removal. Okay, so they submitted new country conditions. They submitted the father's affidavit sharing this story. They submitted expert witness testimony, or like an affidavit, I'm guessing that was. And then very shortly after this, ICE apprehends Maribel at her home, detained her, and scheduled her removal. So essentially right after she tries, she was on this order of supervision, right after she tried to say, hey, I'm actually in extra danger here now, could you reconsider my case? Could I open these removal proceedings again? That's when ICE decided to apprehend her. Let's see, the BIA then the day before that, the BIA denied the stay of removal. No action was taken on the motion to reopen. Then the petition to review the denial of the stay and the emergency motion to stay removal were filed. Let's see. So the court denied this. Okay, so basically she ended up, I don't want to get too nitty gritty, but she basically ended up actually getting removed April 19th, 2017. And the BIA did not get around to looking at that motion to reopen until May 24th, 2017. So the BIA didn't even consider her extra evidence until after she was deported. And then this was appealed to the Sixth Circuit. Then the Sixth Circuit is the case that we're reading now. So even though the BIA denied that motion to reopen, the Sixth Circuit later found that the BIA's analysis was incorrect, that it had abused its discretion, and it really should have taken, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially it should have taken that affidavit from the father much more seriously. And it should have looked or should have considered the relationship between the threat to Maribel and her family relationship. It should have kind of connected those dots between those things a little bit better as well. I don't want to get too into this because I don't want to totally lose you guys. Hopefully you haven't so far. I'm just saying all of this to say, maybe you've just fast forwarded till this point. I'm just saying all this to say the Sixth Circuit ended up remanding this case to the BIA for reconsideration. So basically the Sixth Circuit found that the BIA had not properly considered this motion to reopen, and the BIA kind of fumbled in a way by not even bothering to consider this before Maribel was actually removed. So it seems like Stuckey used, the author, Miss Stuckey, she used this example that has like a very complicated procedural history and also sort of an inconclusive, in a way, finding about whether or not Maribel actually qualified for asylum and what the real risk to her was in Mexico. So she's using this example as like, too bad, so sad, which doesn't mean, and how we need to do things the legal way. Well, if you want to do things the legal way, Maribel seems like actually an example of someone who deserved asylum and who the system kind of screwed over by adjudicating this after they removed her. So this is the type of thing where I'm like, okay, why can't we have empathy like Miss Stuckey is talking about? We can have empathy, but then also that empathy can drive us to just make a quicker decision on a case like this. We have laws, like we have asylum, we have protection. There are ways to protect people. Even when she was on the order of supervision, that's legal. That's not anything illegal or this like magical amnesty or whatever. Like this is actually legal. So for Stuckey to kind of base her whole, it's not like she's basing her argument on this case, but this is her opening case, the opening story, and it is actually the story of someone who really shouldn't have been removed. It's bizarre to me. And it just shows like a lack of carefulness in thinking about the legal like underpinnings of our system. The fact that we have asylum, the fact that there are multiple levels of appeal, the fact that there are adjudicators who look into these, like it's a very complex analysis determining whether someone applies for asylum or not, and that there is even empathy that can go into that determination and the way that our system works, and whether it's like screwing people over or not, and whether it's interpreting our laws with empathy or not, because the law isn't just, the law is interpreted by judges, and those judges can have kind of a predisposition one way or another in their heart in the way that they interpret things. So she totally ignores that in this whole book. Anyways, so now that hopefully I didn't totally lose you, this is the first time I've ever done a video explaining a case, so I was struggling a little bit to know how much detail to. If you want more detail, let me know. If you want less detail, let me know. I could do another video just talking more about this case, and I'll leave a link to it in the description as well. Okay, so that's kind of our opening story. We're only on page 3. Okay, and this is a longer chapter. Then she talks about the next little section is called Mercy for the Sojourner. So she says, I love this sentence. Okay, so after she talks about Maribel, she goes on page 99, there are few worse nightmares a mother can endure than being ripped from her children. Honestly, it's difficult for me to see the justification for Maribel's deportation. And I wrote in this, when I first went through the chapter, I just said, yeah, I don't know. Neither could the Sixth Circuit. Neither could the Sixth Circuit. They also had a hard time finding a justification for this motion to reopen not being granted. So, Ms. Stuckey, the court system was right along with you, having a hard time to see the justification for her deportation. And it wasn't because she was a nice community member, a responsible community member, loving mother, not a criminal. It was because we have asylum laws. It was because we have, complex reasoning in these adjudications. So anyways, I just thought that was really interesting. So it's like, yes, we can have mercy for the sojourner, but there are ways to do it that Miss Stuckey never really mentions in her book. She tries to show in this section that she feels for these people, like these people who are just in bad situations, like Maribel, and she quotes Exodus 22:21 is support for God having compassion on the foreigner, but she's also like, well, maybe we have mercy for the sojourner, but aren't we gonna have mercy for ourselves? And then it moves into the next section, which is who gets our empathy. And then there she tells in this next section, who gets our empathy, it's talking about like 4 different stories of illegal immigrants getting or murdering people. So this, crimes. And she terms these crimes as preventable. Like she says that these crimes are preventable, which let's think about this. Is it feasible to keep out every single illegal immigrant, whatever that is, whatever that means to her in this book? Is that possible? No, it's not possible. So by calling this preventable, it's really like, in what world? Maybe theoretically it's preventable, but why don't we actually think about an immigration system where like acknowledges, hey, the world is crazy and people are poor and people are having a hard time coming to the US to get to other family members who are here, and people are going to continue coming here for economic reasons, for political reasons, for safety, for a better life, for education. They're going to continue to cross our borders without the proper documentation, and that's not really something that's going to stop. So but in what sense is this preventable? Like the whole sentence, to put a little bit of context, she says, while some may dismiss these stories, like the story of the crimes committed by illegal immigrants, by pointing out that citizens also commit heinous murders, the point is that, unlike crimes committed by citizens, every crime committed by a person here illegally is preventable. So I just kind of take issue with that sort of reasoning. Like, why not think about how could we better vet these people? You know what I mean? Instead of saying, oh, people like Maribel can't come here because we have this preventable crime issue. Like it seems like it's like connecting almost two slightly unrelated, like quite unrelated issues. Like an immigrant who's been here, like a Mexican woman who's been here for over a decade, has children, has a very sympathetic case, actually has much of the law on her side for why she should have won her asylum case, and like thinking about how we're going to vet people at the border. Like those are 2 different issues, and I think that they can be looked at with a sense of empathy in different ways. It's like, yes, we should try and vet people who come into this country and make sure we're not letting in dangerous people. I don't think anyone is against that. I don't even think the most lefty liberal is against, would say, welcome all criminals, you're a criminal, welcome, like dangerous criminal, maybe like if you include not drunk driving, like if you include like the most, I don't know, whatever kind of minor infraction you want to think about. Anyways, let's see here, I'm getting a little lost in my, okay, yeah, so she mentions that on page 103, okay. Let's see. Yeah, so again, like she's trying to kind of talk about like, well, who are we really going to care about? Who are we going to have empathy for? The Americans who are dying, like the 4 that she mentioned in this chapter, or these like sad stories like Maribel? And it's like, I understand. I kind of empathize. I kind of understand like the point that she's making when she says, quote, that's why empathy, even in its best form, isn't a sufficient determinant of right or wrong. It's not an adequate driver of policy. You're right, it's not an adequate driver of policy, but certainly it should be a major factor. And then there can be some more careful thinking after that. And then she says, a little further down, says, stories like Maribel and Kate's matter, but they alone can't give us a full picture of immigration in the United States, and therefore they're not sufficient in helping us think through this issue and its related policies. We have to determine what is actually true. Okay, well, what's not true is how you portrayed Maribel's case. Another thing that's not true are the statistics that you quote in the very next section on the top of the next page, where it says what the numbers say. What the numbers say. So she's like, we got to look at the numbers, guys. We got to look at the numbers. There's so much illegal immigrant crime. And then this was the part of the book that just really saddened me, and it made me also wondering about the publishing process, because I was in a journal in law school and we did site checking, and I just don't even think that in our like student publication this would have gotten passed, because this is so egregiously wrong. So this is on page 104 of her book, where she's giving you the hard, cold facts. We're just going to look at reality, guys. We're just going to look at reality. Okay, so we go to footnote number 7. I'm going to go to the back of the book here, a little footnote. That's nice that she has some footnotes. Okay, so this is what I'm going to read her statistics. In fiscal year 2023, Border Patrol recorded 1,254 illegal immigrants convicted of assault, battery, or domestic violence, 2,493 convicted for driving under the influence, and 2,055 for illegal drug possession and trafficking. And that's just those arrested, tried, and convicted. Okay, so that's her sentence. Then you go to footnote number 7, back here in the back of the book. And I don't know if this is going to be backwards for you, but it says, this is her citation to that CBP page. Right, it's CBP. Yeah, CBP fiscal years 2017-2024, some stats. The title of this, even in the citation itself, is Criminal Non-Citizen Statistics. Does it say criminal, illegal immigrant statistics? No, it doesn't. Illegal immigrants, guys, illegal immigrants and non-citizens are two completely separate categories, okay? Non-citizens would be someone who came here with a green card, and she tells this little like happy story about how, oh, I don't care about legal immigration, and here's this nice legal family I know, and they're wonderful, and we go to church together. They're great. I love them. I don't hate them. Okay, so she is like all for legal immigration, whatever that means, because she also doesn't seem to think about asylum as even being legal, which that's a whole other thing we can talk about maybe another time. So this is a complete lie. This is a complete lie. These statistics, and I pulled this up. I'll put the link in the description as well for this footnote number 7. These stats apply to non-citizens, not people who came here legally. So out of everyone who's here with a green card, with a visa, with nothing at all, who are seeking asylum, who have been here for 20 years and have never had a encounter with the police or CBP at all. That's what this includes. Okay, every non-citizen. Non-citizen is a nicer term for alien, okay? But an alien and a legal alien are not the same thing. An illegal immigrant is not the same thing. So these stats apply to a much larger pool of people than illegal aliens, or illegal migrants, illegal immigrants. Yeah, that's what she says, illegal immigrants. That's what's in her book. It's just totally insane that how in the world does someone who's fighting for the truth and has literally names their chapter lie number 4, then continues on page 104 to completely miscite, completely misquote what happened? And I'm like, I'm not blaming her. Like, maybe she just didn't know. Maybe there was a ghostwriter. Maybe, I don't know how this book got published. What was this? Penguin Random House. How did this get by you? Please, I beg of you, please republish this and change it. Can you recall these books and change this and update this and then re-release it? If this is going to be the center of your argument, is talking about the harm to Americans from illegal immigration, and your actual statistics are completely bogus. Okay, that's probably my biggest beef that I have with this book. And it's one sentence, but it's a powerful sentence because people pay attention to numbers. People pay attention to stats, and those numbers do kind of strike you as like, oh, that's a lot of people, but totally insane. In actuality, just looking at other CBP information, undocumented aliens, not non-citizens, I'm talking about undocumented aliens, they actually have a much lower rate of criminal offenses than U.S. born citizens. So anyways, Allie, Miss Stuckey, this is pretty insane. I really hope that you fix this and republish it. Because it's one thing to have an argument that, people disagree with. It's another thing to just totally lie. Okay, so then she continues on in this chapter to sort of dramatize, like, oh, there's so many people coming in. It's like we have multiple states being added, or multiple cities being added to the U.S., and this is just out of control. Okay, then this is an interesting point that she makes later that I want to mention too. She said, so she's talking about how we just have like droves and droves of people coming, which I'm not saying that this is wonderful. Like, I wouldn't argue, I don't know of a lot of people who would say like, yeah, let's have out of control, like unregulated people just coming, because it's not really good for anyone at the end of the day. But when she's talking about this, okay, on page 105, talking about how many people are coming in, she says, meanwhile, Border Patrol encounters too many illegal crossers to detain them for more than a few days, meaning large numbers of immigrants are simply released into the interior of the United States. While keeping so many immigrants in custody for such a brief period of time, we wish they could be detained longer. If only we took their freedom a little bit longer. Border Patrol is unable to vet all of them. As of 2020, there were fewer than 20,000 Border Patrol agents, many of whom are patrolling the border rather than checking the backgrounds of detained immigrants. The simple fact is, we have no way of knowing how many terrorists, traffickers, and other criminals have infiltrated the United States. So, you know what? Has anyone ever been on the inside of a detention center or a prison? It's pretty awful. So I would say it's kind of nice that we're not detaining people when they don't need to be detained. I'm just gonna say, like, I haven't seen, like, or I should say what I do see with the clients that have encountered CBP and that are released is that they have to go to these ICE check-ins. A lot of these people want to follow through with their immigration process, with their asylum case. They get an NTA oftentimes. Whether or not that's filed with the court is another question, but oftentimes they're issued an NTA, so they do the credible fear interview before they release them. Like, there are lots of things that are happening in these just a few days that get these people started into the removal process. So just think about that. Like, this isn't like, if we just kept them in prison longer, things would be so much better. And you know what? Sometimes if there is like a big question mark on someone, like, they're probably not going to be let out. But I don't know why, if there's someone who has like no red flags when they're coming through, they're just going to be detained. Like, for why? And like, she doesn't even say like how long it would take to do a background check. A lot of these people do run like some sort of background check on them before they are released. So Miss Stuckey, I would love to know how many days in detention you would like to see these people, because there doesn't seem to be a number that you give. Like, I would be happy if they were in there for a month. Anyways, so then she goes on to talk about like issues with trafficking. I'm not going to argue too much against this. Like, there are definitely problems with this kind of unregulated immigration and drug trafficking and human trafficking. Those are problems. Those are big problems that need to be dealt with. But is the way to do that by like having a court interpret particular social group to not include family? You know what I mean? Like, which, if you're not an immigration attorney, that probably just didn't make sense to you. But I'm just saying, like, there are very legal things in our system that allow mercy, that allow empathy, that allow justice, all at the same time. And this book just kind of presents it as this black and white, like, you're for the illegals and chaos, or you're against them. We're going to put them in prison and do a background check that's going to take who knows how long. So anyways, I'm not saying that it's not a problem. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I'm saying, as believers, could we think through how to be merciful, how to have a great system, how to do a more efficient background check, how to, like, why don't we just ask different questions? Like, could we ask some different questions? Anyways, is there anything I want to say on that section? Let me look at my notes. Not really. Okay. I kind of have like less and less of a bone to pick with the rest of this book. Then she talks about a change of heart. It's the name of her next section. And that's just talking about how, you know, Democrats and Republicans used to agree more on having a more closed or regulated border, and now we've like, people wanted to like make distinctions more between the policies, and now people have like polarized more. I feel like that's kind of her argument there. Then she talks about bad for everyone. So she's saying that like illegal immigration is bad for everyone. And then she talks about like all these tragedies that happen along the way. And it's a very dangerous trip here. But what she doesn't ponder, and I agree, it is very dangerous. And, you know, I've had multiple clients who have been kidnapped or robbed or otherwise harmed on their way here. It's very dangerous. It is not easy. And there are many tragedies that happen along the way, and people die in the desert, and people who are attacked, and it's very, very bad. But it also makes you wonder why people have a sense of knowing that that could happen many times, and then they proceed to take that trip anyways. Like, it makes you wonder what kind of situation they're in their country of origin that's leading them to feel such a sense of desperation that they would risk this type of journey to come to the United States, right? But I mean, I think there's a point, right? Like, you don't want to have a system that's incentivizing human trafficking. And I think that, you know, I'm not going to talk about that a lot in this video, but I think there's something to be explored more there. Okay, so No Nation Without Borders, that's her next section, and it's sort of about how nationalism isn't so bad. Oh, this is where she talks about, oh yeah, she starts out this section by talking about this couple that did it the right way, which even the right way is like, she gives an example of a couple who came here on student visas, that you have to be sitting pretty already to come here on a student visa. That's not a lot of the world. So just saying. She says there's no question that illegal immigration allows people into our country who offer incredible contributions to our culture, economy, and overall health as a nation. Well, guess what? Sometimes legal immigrants commit crimes too, Miss Stuckey. Sometimes they do. And those crimes were actually captured in the numbers that you quoted as only applying to illegal immigrants. So just throwing that out there again. Okay, then she talks about like how when we have this huge influx of migrants, they come with a different culture and different values, and that can cause, you know, like uprising in countries. She gives all these examples in Europe, like Germany and Sweden, and it almost feels though like she's conflating the spread of like a violent version of Islam with migration. So that's also something, like a pretty complex topic too. And I mean, also, can't you think about ways to integrate? Like, I feel like she just kind of she like names some problems and is like, this is why we shouldn't have immigration, which one, this can happen with legal immigration too, because people are coming from other cultures. But two, why not think about better integration programs? Why not think about that? Like, that would be a nice thing to ponder. Yeah, I could say she makes like so many little points in here I could talk more about, but we'll kind of skip past that.